Good morning, dear students. This is part 6 of chapter 9, that is heredity and evolution. Already 5 parts of this chapter we have done, and most of the topics we have covered. Only 3 topics are left, and those 3 topics we'll discuss in this part. This is the last part of the chapter. Okay, so let me start. Okay, what we are going to discuss in this part of the chapter, that is evolution by status, and then evolution should not be equated with progress, that is the another topic, and then the last topic will be human evolution. Okay, so let me start with the first topic, that is evolution by stages. Evolution by stages. Under this topic we'll study how evolution occurs in organisms stage by stage. Okay, so let me start. A question that arises here: if complicated organs such as the eye are selected for the advantage they provide, how can they be generated by a single DNA change? Surely such complex organs will be created bit by bit over generations. Means only in one generation a complex organs like eye cannot be generated. But how can each intermediate change be selected for? There are a number of possible explanations for this. Even an intermediate stage, such as a rudimentary eye, can be useful to some extent. This might be enough to give a fitness advantages. Okay. In fact, the eye, like the wing, seems to be a very popular adaptation. Insects have them, so does an octopus, and so do vertebrates. The structure of the eye in each of these organisms is different, and that is enough for them to have separate evolutionary origins. Means no matter, all the organisms have different eyes. See, they all have eyes, but the structure of eye is different in all the organism, and that point is enough for them to have their separate evolutionary origins. Means they have originated from separate ancestors. A change that is useful for one property to start with can become useful later for a quite different function. For example, feathers can start out as providing insulation in cold weather, right? But later they might become useful for flight. In fact, some dinosaurs also had feathers, although they could not fly using the feathers. Birds seems to have later adapted the feathers to flight. What does it mean? This means that birds are very closely related to reptiles, since dinosaurs were reptiles. So can we say that birds and reptiles, they had common ancestors? It may be. Very dissimilar looking structures evolved from a common ancestor's design. Yes, it is true that analysis of the organ structure in fossils allow us to make estimates of how far back evolutionary relationships go. But those are guesses about what happened in the history. Are there any current examples of such a process? Okay, so let me show you the. Here we are taking current example of the wild cabbage. So this is a good example. Humans have over more than 2000 years cultivated wild cabbage as a food plant. Okay, and then generated different vegetables from it by selection. From the wild cabbage only they have generated all these. So wild cabbage is the ancestor of all these varieties of cabbage. Okay, see, this is of course artificial selection rather than the natural selection because human has taken it. So some farmers, they wanted to select for very short distance between leaves. Okay, and then they have the cabbage that we eat. So from wild cabbage, if where is the marker is here. Okay, so from wild cabbage, if some farmers have selected leaves, So this was a new variety, that is cabbage, and you all are familiar with this cabbage. Okay, that is a common food nowadays. Some other farmers, they wanted to select for arrested flowers development. Okay, and they had broccoli. Okay, and some others for sterile flowers, and then they got cauliflower. Some they have selected for swollen part of the wild cabbage, and then they came up with this kohlrabi. Some have simply looked for slightly larger leaves, and they came up with the leafy vegetables, that is kale. Okay, and all these structures, they are descended from the same ancestor, that is wild cabbage. Okay, another way of tracing evolutionary relationship depends on the original idea that we started with, and the idea was the change in DNA during reproduction. That is the basic event in evolution. Fine. If that is the case, then comparing the DNA of different species should give us a direct estimate of how much the DNA has changed during the formation of the species. This method is now extensively used to define evolutionary relationship. Here, two steps are given that can tell us about how does evolution occur. Step 1 is replication of DNA, and step 2 is variation. During reproduction, random changes can occur in the DNA that produce variation in the offspring. Sexual reproduction produces a greater variation in the species than asexual variation. Fine. Evolution should not be equated with progress. In an exercise of tracing the family trees of species, we need to remember certain things. And what are those things? The first one is there are multiple branches possible at each and every stage of this process. So, it is not as if one species is eliminated to give rise to a new one. A new species has emerged, but that does not necessarily mean that the old species will disappear. Okay, if you remember in earlier sessions, I have given you the example of beetle. New species has emerged, but earlier species was also there. Okay, it will not get disappeared anyhow. Everything depends on the environment. Fine. Also, it is not as if the newly generated species are in any way better than the older one. It is just that natural selection and genetic drift that have together led to the formation of a population that cannot reproduce with the original one. So they all exist. For example, it is not true that human beings have evolved from chimpanzee. This is the another example I have taken to explain. Uh, See, rather we can say that both human beings and chimpanzees, they have a common ancestor a long time ago, and the common ancestor is likely to have been neither human nor chimpanzee. Okay, so the first step of separation from that ancestor is unlikely to have resulted in modern chimpanzees and human beings. Instead, the two resultant species have probably evolved in their own separate ways to give rise to the current forms. Actually, in fact, there is no real progress in the idea of evolution. Evolution is simply the generation of diversity and the shaping of the diversity by environmental selection. This can be used as definition of evolution. The only progressive trend in evolution seems to be that more and more complex body designs they have emerged over time, right? However, again, it is not as if the older designs are insufficient. So many of the older and simpler designs still survive. In fact, one of the simplest life form is bacteria that inhabit the most inhospitable habitats like hot springs, deep sea thermal vents, and then in ice in Antarctica. So it is not necessary that old species will die and new species will emerge. Everything depends on the situation and the environmental selection. Okay, so evolution is shaping of the diversity by environmental selection. In other words, we can say that human beings are not the pinnacle of evolution, but simply yet another species in the teeming spectrum of evolving life. Human is nowhere the special one. Other species are also there, they evolved and they are the spectrum of evolving life. So let me come to the next topic, that is human evolution. The same tools for tracing evolutionary relationship, excavating, time dating, and studying fossils, as well as determining DNA sequences, have been used for studying human evolution also. There is a great diversity of human forms and features across the planet, so much so that for a long time people used to talk about human races. Skin color used to be the commonest way of identifying these so called races. Some were called yellow, some black, some white, and some brown. A major question debated for a long time was, have these apparent groups evolved differently? Over recent years, the evidence has become very clear, and the answer is that there is no biological basis to the notion of human races. It means all humans are a single species, no matter whether they are having different colors of their skin. It is yellow, it is black, it is white, brown, but they all are a single species. Okay. No matter where we lived for a past few thousand years, we all come from Africa. The earliest members of the human species, that is Homo sapiens, it can be traced there. Our genetic footprints can be traced back into our African roots. A couple of 100,000 years ago, some of our ancestors, they left Africa while others stayed on. Okay. While the residents spread across Africa, the migrants slowly spreads across the planet from Africa to West Asia and then to Central Asia, Eurasia, then South Asia and East Asia. But they all are from which place? They all are from Africa. So our roots are in African countries, right? In animation, you can see how they have spread it out. Okay, our ancestors traveled down the island of Indonesia and then Philippines, then to Australia, and they crossed the Virgin Land Bridge to the Americans. They did not go in a single line. Why? Because they were not traveling for the sake of traveling. They were just going and they were just changing the places. Maybe they were traveling to find out the more convenient situations. They went forward and backwards in all the directions they spread it. Okay. And they went with the groups, sometimes separating from each other, sometimes coming back to mix with each other, and see, even moving in and out of Africa. Everywhere they were just moving. Like all other species on the planet, they had come into being as an accident of evolution and were trying to live their lives the best they could. Okay, here are two questions. Let me read the questions for you and after it I will answer. Why are human beings who look so different from each other in terms of size, color, and looks said to belong to the same species? Right now, in previous slides, I have answered. Okay, let me answer it here also. While human beings do vary in color and general appearances, their genetic makeup is identical to any other human being. One of the speculations put forth for our drastic changes is due to evolutionary pressure, where the need to be easily recognized pushed us towards having widely different faces, right? The next question is, in evolutionary terms, can we say which among bacteria, spiders, fish, and chimpanzees have a better body design? Why and why not? Okay. Body designs are the results of environmental needs and pressure. Hence, we can't conclude that one organism has a better body compared to the another one. For instance, fish have evolved a streamlined design as it is best suited for an aquatic environment. On the other hand, a spider or a chimpanzee might be ill equipped to survive in such aquatic environments. So, we cannot say that particular body design is better and another one is not. Okay, so all the living organisms have their body design as per their surroundings, right? So, this much was all for today's session. The chapter is over. Now you do the exercise and see here you can see the chart. In this chapter, this much we have studied. Heredity, variation, traits, evolution, environmental variation, acquired traits, inherited traits, genetic variations and rules for inheritance, sex determination, artificial sex determination, natural sex determination. Okay. So thank you students. Now we'll be meeting with a new chapter.